Hello all, welcome to the Handspin Review Spot YouTube channel. You can click the link in the description below to go to our Facebook page for all sorts of different updates, and obviously please subscribe here to the channel if you like what we're doing. It really helps us out. Today we're going to look at the OD spinner from Oliver Designs. This is, I believe, Mark Gore's company, and this is, I'll put my hand underneath it so you can see it properly against my dark background. This is the OD spinner. Now, this is quite an interesting spinner. It's been around for some time, and indeed the company has come out with a new design since then, quite recently, and we'll touch on that as well. But I've wanted to get my hands on this for some time now, and I just never did, but finally, here is one. So hopefully you'll be able to see it clearly enough to get some size comparisons. So let's do that before we go any further. There it is, next to a, there we go, zero fewed compass, a stubby. What else should we put it next to? We'll put it next to a Crusader from Casfly. Just trying to give you a few bar designs, you know, that sort of thing. Another blue one. That's a United Machining bow tie. That gives you an idea on those. And then we'll put it next to a few tries, just in case that's what you've got around. There it is next to a Trillium. And a Triad. And then we'll put it next to a big old bearing wrap, because one of my viewers did suggest that I show spinners next to a bearing wrap, because an awful lot of people consider this kind of the original. Obviously the torque bar is the true original, but for a lot of people this is what they first come in contact with. So there it is next to a big old Chinese plastic bearing wrap. Right, so let's talk about the spinner. Well, this is an often lauded spinner. There are a lot of guys in the spinner scene who really like this. It doesn't get maybe as much hype and love as it deserves, really, but it is an interesting spinner. It's kind of, I remember when Fabian from Spin Space reviewed this, he referred to it as the Malaysian torque bar, and I kind of get where he's going with that, in that it does have a certain aesthetic influence from that place, but also something slightly torque bar-like about it. And overall, I've always found the design very attractive. So let's look at the design a bit more. As you can see, it's a bar spinner. It's got sort of quite wide flared lobes, but then a negative taper to the tips. And then these big cutouts, which are kind of zero fewed reminiscent, but they're actually probably closer to something like the tri-compass from Zero Few than they are the compass, because as you can see, on a compass, these pieces of metal are actually quite big around the aperture there, and they're good for stability, but on top of that they do sort of kill the floating in mid-air quality that these sort of cutouts can give. And excuse me, overall it's just got quite a nice look. You have these three different terraces. You have the base body terrace and then the second and third, and those are nicely shaped. There's a little divot in this section here, which works well. The buttons are simple. They're relatively small, but they're bigger than a torque bar button, and they're sort of nicely, gently dished. This has then been sandblasted, and this one was one of 80, I think I'm right in saying, which has then been anodized this very dark blue. This is stainless steel, but it's been anodized this dark blue, and because of the way that anodization works with the oils on your hands, as you touch it, the very top surfaces that your finger actually gets to go a darker colour, and the lighter colour is retained in the grooves, and that gives it kind of a reversed shadowed effect, which I really like. Bearing wise, we're looking at a 688 bearing, and you might, when you first have seen this, instantly thought, if you'd never come across it before, that it was going to be a 188, and that would make perfect sense. This has actually got the bearing that a Casfly Crusader runs within it at the moment, just because I always like to test out different bearings. Performance is very similar, so it doesn't really make much of a difference for the review, to be absolutely honest. As you can see, inside, that side is completely anodized, this dark navy blue, and then there's this unanodized patch on the other side. I presume that was somewhere that it was held while it was being worked. I'm not completely sure, but it works out. You can see on the underside of the button here, I wonder if that'll focus. Will you focus? Yeah, there we go. That's Oliver Designs, which is the name of the company, and obviously this is the OD spinner, and this one is 33 of 80, so thankfully I was right about the amount they made. It's a simple button, works really well. It's a simple spinner. So how does it feel in hand? When you give it a flick, it has a really positive quality about it. It has that thing that I was mentioning, whereby as you balance it on a single finger, that ring that's created does look fairly yeah, it does look like it disappears largely, and so it does give that sort of floating button quality, which so many people love about the Tri-Compass, and I really do as well. There's this lovely pattern, which I should have mentioned. I imagine that's, it's certainly laser etched, laser engraved. I'm not sure. It doesn't. There's no texture to it, but it's there. Maybe it's some sort of decal overlay. I'm not absolutely sure. It's a really, really nice pattern. It's little leaves in concentric circles, and it's just really well done. But anyway, going back to the way it actually feels in hand, it flicks in a backward flick quite forcefully, really nicely, and indeed, even with that bearing in it, it does at least 5 minutes on a vertical spin. It'll do a little bit less than that sometimes on a table spin, but overall it performs well. And incidentally, you can get a 688 to 188 converter. I think that's from Noble Spin. I could be wrong, but I believe it is. And if you got one of those, obviously you would throw the weight even further away from the bearing, and it would also allow you to put quieter bearings in. And it has quite a lot of tactile feedback, or judder, or axle lash, or whatever you want to call it, as you move it side to side. All bar spinners have that to a certain degree. This one, with its fairly heavy outer weighting, it does have a little bit more of that than some. That will be an absolute plus point to some guys and not so much to others. I quite like it in this design, and I have to say I've carried this quite a bit since it arrived. In terms of ergonomics, these edges, nothing has a chamfer here as such, but because this has been sandblasted but with a very fine media by the looks of it, it does feel sort of soft touch all over, and so I haven't noticed any excess sensitivity or anything like that while using this. By and large, it's felt very comfortable. This retention groove here, there's a little bit more movement in it than I might like just for my finger size, but overall it works well for a forward or reverse flick. It fidgets quite nicely because of these grooves as well. So yeah, it's really, really nice, I have to say. I don't have many negative things to say about this at all, and that's where I come down to the negative points. There aren't many. I suppose it could have a chamfer. It'd be a tiny bit more comfortable, but it would lose some of the aesthetic sensibility it has. I'm quite happy with the sort of soft touch media blast, to be honest. From there, it's quite a noisy spinner. As I say, this has got a non-original bearing in it at the moment, but it's showing sort of equal volume, to be honest. It's not really lowered that. And that would tempt me to get the converter and put maybe a 1-drop or some other full stainless steel bearing inside it and see if that mediated the noise a little bit. The bearing that it came with was a little bit looser. Essentially, this is a press fit, but what it is really, it's a close slip fit because they don't put any glue in these, and I think that's quite good, and it gives you an example of just how well machined they are and how good the tolerances are. But as I say that, there is one downside to that, which is that the original bearing that this came with, I could push these buttons back and forth more easily than I can with this bearing, and personally that would have been a bit of an annoyance for me. It didn't move while I was spinning, but if I gave a really, really heavy reverse flick, I might just have pushed it over slightly, so I would probably glue this bearing. It's a pretty minor detail. The only other downside really is that as much as I like this design, and I think this has got lots of lovely unique points about it, the latest design from OD Designs, to me it's a little bit too close to a Pepiaka, and as other people that have watched this channel will know, I'm no great fan of Custom Knife Factory or the Pepiakas overall, or the ones I've tried so far, but doesn't mean I like clones any more than I would with any other company. And while it's not a direct clone, it runs the risk of just being a little bit too close for comfort, I think. And yeah, it just puts me off the company just a touch. I think quite a lot of people have felt that way, and there was a lot of comments to that effect when the design was debuted on the Facebook groups and all that kind of thing. It's no massive deal, and certainly it won't stop a lot of people. I'd still like to try it in hand, but it's worth mentioning. So there you go, that's the OD spinner in this instance, in this dark navy blue anno. And overall, if you wanted one of these for your collection, if you were building quite a nice collection, I think this is quite a nice early design. Certainly when this was first released, this was really top of the tree. Nowadays it feels maybe a little bit behind the curve, but overall I'm still quite pleased to have this here, and I'm not sure it will leave that quickly, if at all. So there you go, that's the OD spinner from Mark Gore and Oliver Designs. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. It's very much appreciated. And we'll catch you at the next review. Thank you. Bye-bye.